stunting, tumbling, practices,
6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4,
competitions.
5, 6, 7, 8. Cheer chats.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Cheer Chats, where we will cover everything about cheer. I'm Emma Mashfej,
And I'm Lexi Savarino.
and we will be talking about the background, competition, stunts, tumbling, and even practices. Let's jump right into our first topic, where we'll be talking about the background of competition cheerleading. Let's start with how cheer started. Surprisingly, it was male-dominated, and what do you think about that?
I think it's kind of ironic because cheer is mostly all women today, and there is some co-ed teams, but yeah, I just think it's a little surprising.
Yeah, same. I thought it was surprising learning that it was male-dominated at first. But now let's take a look at some facts about early cheerleading. Okay, starting off, pom-poms became popular in the 1920s, and they are iconic today still.
Yeah, pom-poms are mostly used in football cheer today and not as much comp, so.
Now let's move on to the different types of cheerleading, starting off with all-star cheer.
All-star cheer is very competitive. There's minimal competitions, but there's still a lot. And yeah.
Let's take a peek at some of the different types of cheer.
So a different type of cheer is also this. There's a cheer abilities team for special need kids, and I think it's great because it's an opportunity for people that don't get the opportunity to do normal cheer, so they still have
Yeah, same. I think that's a really good thing. We were able to ask some cheerleaders their opinion on if cheer should be considered a sport or not, so let's go take a look at that.
I do think they can be considered sports because there's a lot of physical activity and a lot of teamwork involved in them. I do. I think that sideline cheer and competition cheer is considered a sport because it's very active.
Okay, now let's talk about the different levels of all-star cheerleading, starting off with varsity.
So varsity is mostly filled with juniors and seniors. JV is filled with mostly sophomores and some juniors depending on your skill level, and freshman is all freshmen.
Let's also talk about all-star cheer and how it's different to rec cheer, because I know it's very different.
Yeah, there's 7 different levels, and there's also youth and teams. So level 7 is not very known, but it still is, and it all depends on your skill level.
Let's take a quick look at some of the different levels of all-star cheerleading.
So there's intermediate and advanced also. So advanced is obviously the higher skill levels, and intermediate is just I don't know. There's just lower.
Okay. Now let's talk about cheerleading gear and the uniforms and what you need to wear.
So uniforms are typically very glittery and sparkly, and the colors depend on your cheer gym, and it's typically shorts or skirts.
Let's take a quick look at some graphics to get a better idea of some of the cheerleading apparel and what they need to wear. Okay, looking at the graphic, we see that there's cheer shoes, and they need to wear bows in their hair. So, can you elaborate on that and say why they need to wear it?
So shoes are typically white or black, and it all depends on your uniform and how it would look. And your bows are also based on the color of your uniform, and your hair needs to be very slicked in a high pony.
We were able to ask some cheerleaders from Wayne Hills what they think is the most important part of their cheerleading gear, so let's go look at that.
I think the most important part of a cheerleader's uniform is the hair and makeup because it just pulls the whole outfit together. I think the most important part is the uniform because it shows what team you're for.
Okay, so what are the different elements of cheerleading? What is there?
So there's jumps, there's tumbling, and there's stunts. So jumps is there's usually a jump sequence of 3 jumps. Tumbling, it all depends on the level of your team. There's like tucks, handsprings, back walkovers, fulls, layouts. And stunts is also based on the skill level.
Oh, that's like really interesting. But let's take a look at a graphic about the different elements of cheerleading.
There's also baskets as an element of stunts, and there's like twisting baskets, kick single baskets, and it all depends on your skill level too. Don't go anywhere. Up next, Adriana will be joining me, and we're going to be talking about competitions.
We hope you enjoyed our segment today and learned something new about cheer.
Welcome back. I'm here with
Adriana Falcone.
and we're going to be moving on from the overview of cheerleading, and now we're going to be talking about the cheerleading competitions. So where are these competitions typically held?
Typically, bigger competitions are held in arenas, and smaller ones are held in convention centers, and sometimes even high schools host competitions.
Can I get the arena and convention center graphic? Typically, how many people attend these competitions?
So usually for the bigger competitions, it's like thousands of people, and then smaller ones is like hundreds, but it really just depends on how many teams compete. Speaking of where cheerleading competitions are held, we are going to be asking 2 cheerleaders questions on their favorite competitions.
My favorite place I have competed is the Summit because you get to run around Disney with your teammates and bond with them.
I loved competing at the All-Star Worlds in Orlando because it was really fun and we got to go on the rides like after we competed, and the overall comp was really, really fun.
What are the different types of bids to Summit and Worlds, and how can you get a bid?
So there's bids like paid and at large, and you get bids by going to big competitions and you have to win them, and they're like invitations to go, and only certain teams get them.
Can I get the Summit and Worlds bid graphic? What are the different types of like bids, and like how much money can you like get off or whatever?
So there's partial paid and fully paid. So partial paid obviously pays for like half, and then if you get a full paid bid, then Varsity, which is like a cheerleading brand, pays for you and your team to go.
So moving on, how many judges typically go to these competitions?
So there's usually around like 10 judges, and each judge judges a different section of the routine, like stunts and tumbling.
Can I get the judges graphic? Do the same judges judge like everything the same time?
So there's usually different judges, and there's normally like multiple competitions happening like all over every weekend. So there's different judges for every competition, and then usually the best judges get to judge the biggest competitions.
So moving on to nationals, what are nationals?
So nationals are like the really big competitions, but not the end of the year ones. These are usually competitions where you can earn a bid at, and you can hold really good titles there if you win.
Can I get the nationals graphic? So what do you think the difference between a normal competition and a nationals is?
So I think nationals is definitely more nerve-wracking because there's a lot more on the line, and there's usually a lot more people there, and you go against more people.
Yeah, I agree. So what do you get when you win these competitions?
So typically at these competitions, you win medals and trophies, and then if you're like the champions, you can win rings. And if it's a really big competition, you can like personalize the ring with your team name, and it's really fun.
Okay, so for competitions, there's day ones and day twos. What's the difference?
So day 1 and day 2, you compete the same routine, obviously, and they're in the same place, but sometimes day 1 is scored less than day 2, so most of the time day 2 is more important.
So can I get the day 1 and day 2 comp graphic? So you were talking about the scoring being different. How is the scoring usually different?
So the scoring is usually broken up in percentages. So day 1 might be 25% of your overall score, and day 2 might be more at 75%. So that's how day 2 can affect your overall score more. Speaking of day 1 and day 2 competitions, we're going to ask 2 cheerleaders which competition day these girls prefer.
I prefer a 2-day comp because you get to stay overnight and you have more bonding time with your team. It also gives you 2 tries at the competition.
I like 2-day comps because if you do bad the first day, then you have a second chance and you get to stay overnight and like run around the hotel with all your friends.
Don't leave now. When you come back, I will be joined with Emma as we will be discussing stunting.
Welcome back. That was a great discussion on cheer competitions. We will now get into the great topic of stunts, starting off with the mental aspects. How do you deal like mentally with stunting?
You honestly just have to keep like a positive mindset when like stunting because everyone just like needs to be positive and make sure your stunt like isn't falling.
Can I get the mental aspects of cheerleading graphic? How do you deal right before like you perform and like if your stunt falls and like performance anxiety?
Performance like anxiety is very serious, and you just need to like stay like in a steady mindset because you need to make sure like you're like very like prepared, and you need to make sure your stunt doesn't fall because it could like lead to injury. We also had the chance to talk to 2 cheerleaders. We are going to ask them about how they feel about the mental aspect of cheer.
I have to make sure that I'm calm before I compete, and I also like talking to my friends on my cheer team, and then they help encourage me and I encourage them, and we make sure that we're all ready.
Dealing with the mental aspects of cheer, just like knowing that you can do it and like calming your nerves, because knowing that you can do it will like push you to encourage your teammates more and know that they can do it if they're having like a bad day or something.
Okay, now we're going to be moving on to like bases. Can I get the bases graphic? Okay, what are like the important thing about bases? Like what is needed?
You need to make sure you have the right grips. You need to have strength, and you also need to catch your flyer. And you need to also have a lot of trust in your flyer. And you just need to think that like they know what they're doing and they can do it.
Yeah, that seems like really important. Let's talk more about like trust. Can I get the trust graphic?
In trust, it's like very important that like you're overcoming your fears and like you have trust in your bases that they'll catch you when you fall. And this goes for bases too. Like you need to have trust in your flyer that they'll stay in the air.
Speaking of trust, let's ask these 2 cheerleaders how they trust each other on their cheer team.
So we practice a lot, which makes me feel more confident in what I'm doing, and it makes me feel more comfortable. And so I know that when we stunt or when we tumble, I know they're always going to be there for me.
Trust my teammates by like knowing everything happens for a reason. Like if we all work together, we know that we can get the job done and do like the best we could.
Okay, now let's get into flyers. Can I get the flyer graphic? Okay, what are like important things flyer needs?
You definitely need to stay tight. You need to be flexible, and you need to stay in the air because it also like goes back to like the mental aspect. Like you need to make sure you're like have a steady like mentality because it could lead to injury if you're not confident in yourself.
Another like really important thing about stunting is like the baskets. Can I get the basket graphic?
Yeah, baskets are very important, and it's super important that you're like safe while doing them. You need to also have trust, and when twisting and flipping in the air, it's very like you need to like, be safe. But don't go too far. When you come back, you'll hear Adriana and Emily talk about the topic of tumbling.
Welcome back. I'm Emily Mandler.
And I'm Adriana Falcone.
Moving on from stunting, we are going to jump right into the different tumbling and different levels of skill. Speaking of skill level, what are the different skill levels required for each level?
So there's 4 main levels of tumbling. We have level 1 and 2, which is the beginning, which is like back walkovers, back handsprings. Levels 3 and 4 are like when you start to do more flips with like back tucks and back layouts. And yeah.
Let's take a look at what the level 5 and 6 will look like. Can I have the different levels graphic, please? So, as you can see, like levels 5 and 6, like they have to do with more of like flipping and stuff.
Yeah, and levels 5 and 6 are like the higher levels, which require like a lot more training. And then also level 7, which is the highest level, is more like collegiate level, and it's the most intense and it's not that calming.
Okay, speaking of tumbling, when you're tumbling, lots of things can happen to you, including a bunch of different types of injuries.
So cheer is obviously a very difficult sport, which puts athletes at high risk of injury. If an athlete is injured on a team, it can cause like a lot of stress, and it can like cause the coaches to need to replace them, and it just causes a lot. So like you should try to like stretch and stuff before so that injuries don't happen, but like they are common and they can happen in cheer. So let's see the injury graphic. Speaking of injuries, we did have a chance to speak with 2 fellow students that have been affected by injuries from cheer.
Yes, I broke my fingers tumbling, and it affected my team because they had to change the whole entire routine the week before competition.
No, I haven't, but many of my teammates did, and it really affected our team because it was stressful for everyone and the coaches.
Let's take a look at a graphic to see what tumbling into stunts looks like.
So tumbling into stunts can add really cool elements to your routine. It can also add smooth transitions from tumbling to stunts, and you really need to have great timing and positioning so that no one gets hurt, because if someone isn't in the right spot or timing is off, then someone can get hurt. But if it's done correctly, then it can look really cool, and it's a really great aspect to the routine.
All right, now we're going to talk about timing in tumbling. So let's take a look at the timing graphic.
So timing is a really big aspect of cheerleading. You can gain a lot of points from timing when being judged at a competition, because the judges like to see precision in the routine, and also a lot of things in the routine are matched up with the music. So like say you have a motion or like your tumbling pass, if you're twisting, then there could be like a sound effect in the music that does that. So you want to make sure it matches up and that everything is on time.
Okay, another big part of like tumbling and cheerleading is like the strengthening and conditioning that gets involved. So could we take a look at that graphic, please?
So strength and conditioning is a big part of tumbling, especially when you are working on the higher levels of skills. So you want to really condition and focus on like your core and your legs and your upper body, because having the strength can build up your stamina, and that will help you like get through a routine, especially if you're tumbling a lot, and not be as tired in the end. And it can also help you stay in shape, which will make your tumbling easier.
Yeah, I completely agree with that fact. Like the more that you like work yourself and like work out, the more your body's going to be like prepared to do everything, because like cheerleading is a very hard sport and it takes a lot, and your body needs to be prepared for all of that. So another big part of cheerleading is also like the mental aspect of it. So yeah.
So the mental aspect of cheerleading is a big part, especially when it comes to tumbling, because tumbling is mostly a mental game in your head. You have to like believe that you can do your skills so that you do them. And a lot of times cheerleaders get in their heads and they can develop something called a mental block, which stops them from doing their tumbling because they're either really scared to do it or they don't think they can. So it's really important that you have positive communication with your whole team, and you encourage all your teammates to make sure that they all do what they're supposed to. And also you really want to stay focused and confident, especially when under pressure, because at competitions it can be really nerve-wracking, especially if you're competing in new skills. So you just need to be confident in yourself. So now let's take a look at the mental aspects of cheerleading and how these cheerleaders deal with their mentality during tumbling.
I continue to tumble every week with people just so that I feel confident in my tumbling and all my skills.
You just have to stay positive because if you don't, then there could be many injuries. So we just want to prevent it.
Wow, so interesting. We hope you learned lots about competition cheerleading and all the things that have to do with tumbling.
Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, you'll be hearing all about cheer practices and what they're like.
Emily and Adriana. Now that we've talked about skills, stunts, comps, and a bit of background on competition cheer, we can get into practices which help improve stunts, tumbling, and help lead up to an amazing competition day and be very prepared. So we can start off with time and how long do practices usually take?
So practices normally take from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. But then if there's a choreography, it could last longer and it could be 6 hours.
Wow, that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
We can also take a look at a graphic about timing to get a better image. Okay, so at the graphic,
practices normally take, or the routine is normally 2.5 minutes long. And at practices, we'll break down the routine and we'll work on certain parts of it. And it's just productive. We try and be as productive as possible.
Moving on to expectations. The expectation is a very important thing in cheer practices, so we can show a quick graphic as an example as part of the expectations.
At practice, you're supposed to be listening to your coaches at all times. You're trying to be as productive as possible. You only get so much time to practice before you compete, so you want to make sure that you're prepared and ready, and you want to look your best.
Speaking of expectations, we were able to interview 2 cheerleaders from Wayne Hills Competition Cheer, and we got their input on the expectations of cheer practices, and we can pass it on to them.
You should be on time for practice, and you should always be very focused because it's important that no one gets hurt. And you should also be in your right uniform or outfit for practice.
My expectations of practices is for everyone to give their all and behave for the coach to give us instructions and help us get better.
Now onto clothing and looks. The look is very specific in cheer, so let's take a quick peek at the graphic.
Okay, looking at the graphic, you're not allowed to wear jewelry, and you have to have the appropriate hair. It has to be up, and you have to be in uniform.
Yes, you want to make sure that you're not wearing anything that could get caught, especially if you're stunting. You want to make sure you're being very safe. And while we're still on the topic of looks, we will jump right into the other question from our interview we previously showed with our 2 cheerleaders from Wayne Hills.
You should have no jewelry. Your hair should be up and in a tight ponytail, and you should wear your correct uniform or practice wear.
The specific look we usually follow is slicked back hair, and then you wear your uniform, no jewelry, and no acrylic nails.
Next is full outs. Full outs are crucial in practices leading into competition day, so we can move right into the graphic for this topic.
Okay, so what are full outs? What do you do during full outs?
So full outs are when you do every single part of the routine from beginning to finish, and you try and hit all your stunts, which means no falls. You want to tumble and you want to try just like you're performing it on competition day. You want to make sure you have energy and stamina, and you want to have facials, which really bring the routines together.
Okay, moving on to fun things at practices. Fun practices always bring a great mood with practices, so we can have a quick overview of what that looks like.
So especially around the holidays, we'll always have fun practices that could be themed. We do Secret Santas. Bid reveals are always fun. It's when you find out if you're going to big end of year competitions. We do team games, and we hype up our teammates while they do their stunt. And we just try and bring positive energy to practices, and it always makes it so much more fun. Now that we've covered all the basic topics of comp cheer, we will have to end our podcast here.
Yes, we hope you learned something new, but now we have to go.
Bye everyone.